This is Nicole with I Explore Science, and today we are looking at exploration and really a simple shift that you can make to foster exploration in your science classes. So it is really hard to let your students figure things out. It can be really hard to just not give the correct answer or even really acknowledge an accurate response. That was a big one for me. It's hard to transition to being an exploration guide and kind of not a teacher in the traditional sense of teaching. We've really spent so many years in an education system where knowledge is conveyed by one person to another. It's told. It's not developed, it's not really fostered, it isn't discovered, it's just passed on in like some shape or form, whether it's verbally or in writing or via a video or whatever. And obviously these are tools of communication and these are skills that we want to teach our students. But right now we have this imbalance where all of the information is always conveyed and always communicated in that way. And we don't have that counterbalance of the critical thinking and the exploration and the discovery and the figuring it out and the using science skills to do it. So that's where the exploration comes in. We need to find that balance in our classroom. And it's hard for us to do that as teachers because we've experienced education in this way of this teaching as telling, of this communicating information, of one person having all the info and giving it to another person. We were taught that way ourselves. We were taught to teach that way in our teacher education programs. And then we've really just continued that tradition in our own classes. And there's no judgment there. Like, that's been our experience. And it can be really hard to break these habits and actually shift our identity as teachers is really what we're doing. And shift it to this attitude of fostering exploration and build a repertoire of responses that actually fosters exploration and discovery instead of the teaching as telling approaches that we've done in the past. So, and honestly, I've been doing this for, 6 or 7 years now, and I started my journey with this pedagogy 6 or 7 years ago, so I wasn't doing it well back then. But I still find myself slipping into these habits. And this is even with my own children whose education I love, their love for learning, their future success, and their well-being and their happiness, and all of these things literally mean the world to me. So I value, doing it right with them as best as I can. And I still catch myself falling into, doing the things I don't want to do as a teacher or as a guide. Falling into that explanatory, that teaching as telling, instead of, roles, instead of giving them the space to just explore and discover and do that themselves. So I'm going to share with you a couple of things that I've learned that I do, and then some things that I've learned to kind of shift to instead that has helped to foster exploration. So before we dive too much into that, I want to just introduce myself because there's a lot of new people in the group. I'm going to do this really quick, but I'm Nicole Van Tassel. I'm founder of I Explore Science, I Explore Academy, which is my PD program. And it's just all about shifting for teachers who are shifting to the NGSS and this phenomenon-focused exploration-based learning that goes with the three-dimensional shift to the NGSS. So I created this Facebook group that you are a part of to support teachers like you, and I'm just really glad to be able to do that. So before transitioning to my role as a teacher, I worked in both private and public schools, so I've kind of experimented with this pedagogy with students across the gamut. The kind of urban students, some are lower socioeconomic status, as well as kind of private school students that made up a different socioeconomic status. So I've just been able to kind of see it at work in different communities, different places, as well as the work I've done with teachers in I Explore Academy that run the gamut from, again, charter schools, private schools, public schools across the country, honestly, even across the world. We have teachers in Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates and all of that. So it's just been fascinating to just see this pedagogy at work in many different places. So I worked in middle school and high school classrooms primarily, been in the education field for over 10 years now, classroom teacher for about 7 of those, been doing this for just over 2 years. I'm definitely an idealist and an optimist, and I am always going to try to find ways to make things work. to do our best, give it our all, and sometimes people get annoyed with that, and I know it can be a really stressful season right now, and some teachers are just hanging on for dear life, and I totally understand that as well. So if right now this whole exploration thing is like too much for you to handle, like that's okay. We all also have to take care of ourselves. You have to give yourself grace. You have to give others grace. We're all just here learning together, supporting each other, doing what we can. And all of this also is very much a journey. It takes time. It takes baby steps. You don't get all the pieces of the puzzle all at once. We just want to do the best we can in the moment. And like our best in the moment changes moment to moment. And that's okay too. So anyway, beyond all that teaching stuff, I'm a mom. My kids are all like under 5 and they're crazy. And they're not here right now or you would hear a lot of screaming. In terms of beyond work, I don't have a lot of hobbies. I'm really bad at making time for self-care, even though I know it's important. So I need to work on getting some of those. Okay, so moving on. So a few weeks ago, okay, so back to like, we're bad at letting our students or our, where is my little box? Here we go. We're bad at letting our students or our kids discover, right? So case in point, a few weeks ago, my kids were playing with vinegar, baking soda, a little food coloring, make it fun. And my daughter asked me, can I have more water? And I like literally almost said, it was almost out of my mouth, it's not water, it's vinegar. I almost said it and I managed to stop myself right before I said it. And it would have been so easy for me to say like, are you like, it's just water, like, or it's not water, it's vinegar, like smell it. And I wanted to, because then I didn't have to have a whole big conversation about how it's not, how it's not water. But there wouldn't have been any learning in that. It wouldn't have challenged her ideas. It wouldn't have, she wouldn't have been using any critical thinking. It wouldn't have forced her to make observations or to ask questions. So instead I replied, are you sure it's water? And there probably could have been a better response, but that was just what I came up with at the moment. And then we talked about kind of like why she thought it was water, and then I suggested that we smell it. And she's told me it smelled like crocodiles. And then when we kind of repeated this whole activity the other day, she told me it smelled like poop. She's 5, or she's almost 5. So what do you say? But the important point was that she realized that it didn't smell like water. And so we were able to use that as kind of a launching point of like, what was it then? And I would not expect her to know or to figure out or anything like that it was vinegar. But the fact that she was able to discover this wasn't water, it didn't smell like water, it didn't fit my idea of what water is like, what water smells like, what I've observed about water in the past, was a launching point to make other observations. Like, you know what? Some of the other things I'm noticing don't fit what I understand about water. Like, well, what happens if we dump water on this, it was baking soda, but this white stuff we have on our tray? Oh, it doesn't make it fizzy. Okay, but what if we use this other weird stuff? Like, oh, that does make it fizzy. That's interesting. So we can start to kind of foster some of these additional observations just by this jumping point of, can I have more water? Now, it would have, it would have just been so much easier to just tell her, hey, no, it's not water, it's vinegar. But that whole conversation, and while it wasn't like the most intellectually stimulating conversation in the world, it was important for her to be using those observation skills and to be thinking in those ways. That was an important thing to do and to have. And I almost shut that down by simply flipping into that like correction mode or that explanatory mode. And this happens in our classrooms all the time. It's a lot easier to just tell our students the content or tell them the answer or correct their idea or whatever it is than it is to guide them through that process and guide them through those conversations. Because sometimes those conversations can be hard and can be draining and can be tiring. But we really, every time we shut that exploration down or we shut that discussion down, we actually lose an opportunity for deeper learning. And ultimately, it does put more work on us as teachers to continue being the one responsible for explaining and continue being the one responsible for all of the teaching and the learning. And we do want to shift that responsibility to our students. So this is one of my favorite quotes. When you teach a child something, you take away forever his chance of discovering it for himself. I think it really emphasizes that when we are actually giving our students a disservice when we are not embracing exploration and discovery. I think that sometimes we think about these strategies like exploration, discovery. These are a bonus. It's a better way to learn. It's something that's more fun. It's more engaging. It's an addition to what we're doing. And it is. It's all of those things. But I think it's also, I just realized you're not seeing my favorite quote. I think it's also important to recognize that it is also, it's also actually taking away from our students when we're not using these strategies. We are taking away from them a degree of ownership in their learning. We're taking away from them the opportunity for them to figure it out and grow their brains in the process. I was working on a resource for iExplore Academy, and it was just like a little activity that we were doing, but looking at how do we develop growth mindsets and how do we support our students in developing like that persistence and that stick-to-itiveness and all of that. And part of it is how we are thinking about mistakes and how we're thinking about errors and all of that. And one of the things, again, that I knew but was pointed out to me again was that mistakes we don't learn when we have information confirmed to us. We learn through a mistake. We don't learn when we do something right. We learn when we get something wrong. We learn during the process of trying something new or figuring something out, and sometimes mistakes are a part of that process. So when we take that away from a student, when we simply tell them an answer, when we simply give them the information, we are literally taking away their opportunity to grow their brains and to figure it out themselves and to grow their brains, upgrade their brains, improve their processing systems, all of those things, and discover it for themselves. And that's a forever thing. That's an irreversible thing. So we can either choose to create environments and set the stage and take on this new identity as guides of our students' learning and exploration-based teachers, and give them that agency and that autonomy and build independence and confidence in our students by showing them that they can actually do it themselves. And it's baby steps getting them there, but really helping them to reach kind of a fuller expression of themselves as learners, almost like allowing them to really just thrive as learners. Or we just continue to just tell them what they need to know, tell them the facts, tell them the information, tell them how to get there. Do this step first, do this step second, do this, put this beaker into that beaker, observe what happens, write down what happens, draw this conclusion. And it really just keeps them dependent, and it prevents them from taking that ownership of their learning and really evolving as independent learners. Anyway, so our goal is to help our students discover. Sorry, I kind of took a little tangent there. But our goal is to help our students discover, and a lot of our times it's our own interactions with our students that stands in our way. And they are very subtle interactions. They're not things that we do on purpose. They're accidental things, but they squash exploration before it even begins. So what are some things that we actually can do? These are the dialogue shifts that we can make that can actually we can put into our repertoire that can help us foster that exploration and shift the thinking back to our students. So, like I said, oftentimes our responses squash these exploration before we even begin. We tend to confirm. Like, students say something and it's the right answer, and we dive right in with like a yes. And sometimes it's subtle, and sometimes it's just a very obvious. But once we've confirmed something to them, there's no need to move forward for them. They have the right answer. They're good to go. So there's no need for them to wonder or to investigate further or even think any more about the subject. They don't even have to think about why they came to that conclusion. So, my daughter sees a bug and she says, oh, that's a bee, and it is a bee. And I say, oh yeah, that's a bee. Okay, I've confirmed it, and now we can move on. But what if I said, well, how do you know it's a bee? And now I'm encouraging her, or like kind of pushing her to make additional observations. Well, I see it has stripes. Oh, well, what do other animals have stripes? Do other, insects have stripes? Oh yeah, well, I think it, so you can continue the learning by just shifting the response, by not confirming. We tend to correct. If something is not the right answer, we correct. No, that's not water, that's vinegar. And again, we do not encourage our students or our kids to test their ideas or discover anything for themselves. And that can also, the correction can also, and we don't mean it this way, but it can also really be discouraging. And our middle and high school students are not going to show you that they're like upset, or they might, but I mean, they may not. They're probably going to, hide those feelings if they're upset or they're embarrassed about being corrected. But they might just not volunteer an answer next time, right? A young child, on the other hand, might show you they don't like being corrected. And they might just, like my daughter, if I correct her, honestly, she pretty much just quits. If I, however, just redirect in some way, like we do this game where we play like sounds of letters, and I'll say, I spy something that starts with a f sound. And she says mermaid. And instead of saying, no, mermaid doesn't start with a f sound, I say, oh, mermaid, starts with a and I just acknowledge what she said. And then I say, okay, now I'm looking for something that starts with a f sound. I don't even correct. I just kind of redirect back to it. And then when the game goes on, and we continue searching for that f sound. So I didn't even need to correct it. I just acknowledged what she said. I made an observation. Mermaid starts with a okay, but now I'm looking for a f, and we go on. So correction, we don't mean it in a bad way. We don't mean it to shut our students down, but oftentimes it ends up shutting students down. And simply by tweaking our approach, we can continue the conversation and continue the exploration and continue the learning without leading to maybe some of the negative impacts of that kind of correction. And it's not really criticism, but just kind of correction. So, I mean, and these things happen in the classroom. We dismiss ideas. We might explain too much. We might give away too many instructions. Honestly, the more we talk, the worse it is usually. But these are all just things that we do, and we don't do it on purpose. So what are some things that we can do instead? We can definitely limit our responses, but that's not to say that we shouldn't be involved in discussions with our students, because they oftentimes, they need us to guide them still. They often need us to help them explore, and this is especially true of students who have lost touch of this practice through simply not doing it for many years and years. If you're teaching, and this is obviously a group for middle and high school students or teachers, but if you're teaching, younger elementary students, your students might naturally, you might just see it easier to get them engaged in an exploration, and they might come up with those questions and come up with the ideas and the tests and all of that a little bit more naturally than older students. But students who've sat in classrooms for years and years and have been told this is the information we're learning and this is how we're learning it, they might really struggle to generate questions and generate ideas and figure out how to put ideas together and really explore and discover. It's an unfamiliar practice to them. It doesn't mean they can't do it, but it means they really need you, again, to take on that role and that new identity as a guide, and not like the traditional like teacher or like lecture sage on the stage kind of thing. And so they need you to engage with them in that sense. So some of the things you can do during those conversations, we can make observations. A student makes a claim that isn't correct, like my daughter and her mermaid. I'm looking for an F sound, and here's a mermaid. The student makes the claim. The oldest rocks are always near the edges, or the oldest rocks are always near the middle of the ocean. In a typical classroom, we might simply correct the statement, like, no, the oldest rocks are not near the middle of the ocean, the oldest rocks are near the continent. But our goal, again, is to have our students realize the error. Ideally, we would have another student pop in with the observation like, oh, wait, but no, look, the old rocks are here on the edges of the continents. But if our students don't hop in with that observation, we might step in and make an observation that challenges the viewpoint. But I see you've colored the rocks here blue, or I see on this map that the rocks here are blue. What does that blue indicate again? And the student can then interpret that evidence that the blue rocks are the oldest, and that where those blue rocks are located and how it conflicts with the claim that they've made. And then they can go from there in revising their ideas. Along those lines, we can wonder aloud and ask questions. So my daughter with her vinegar, I said about the water, and I said, why do you think that? I asked a question. And then I might say, well, I wonder what it smells like. asking these questions and wondering aloud can really help our students because they model these skills. So it's modeling wondering, it's modeling asking questions, and then it also helps them to think about these specific elements of the phenomena. So it's modeling the practice itself, but it's also focusing on like the phenomenon at hand. It's really simple, but these simple shifts in how we are engaging in dialogue with our students can prevent us from slipping into these old roles and help us to really take on this identity of kind of like an exploration and discovery teacher and more of a guide than, you know, like a traditional style of teaching. And just kind of like embrace that in our classroom. And it is, so it's kind of like, it reminded me of that game where you have to only answer in questions. Like it's really, really hard to do at first. But the more that you do it, it actually opens the field for your students to step up more and more with their own explanations. So one of the things that was really funny, so when you only answer in questions, it actually like forces them to have to come up with their own ideas or their own responses or their explanations. It does put it on them. My daughter's lately, she's been on this little kick where she just is looking for a lot of reassurance, and I want to be there for her, but I also want her to be confident in her own assessment of things. So she'll like say silly things like, Mom, I scratched the table, or I bumped into Leo, or I like knocked over my Barbies, or things like that. And at first I was like, oh, it's fine. But then I'm like, wait, I don't need to tell you that it's fine. Like, what do you think about it? So I started just saying to everything like, well, what do you think about that? And just asking her. And mostly she's just like, I think that's okay. And then it's okay. And then one of the times I said that, she's like, Mom, you can't say that all the time. But really the thing is like, I can. And when I say like, well, what do you think about that? She comes up with her own ideas and she figures it out for herself. I'm not problem solving for her. And so she has the space to decide if it's okay or if it really does bother her. Maybe she tells me, I don't like that. Or I scratched I fell over and I'm not okay. I bumped into Leo and he's not okay because he's crying. You should go check him. So sometimes it's a social emotional thing, but sometimes it's science concepts. So she has the space to decide and discover for herself. Our students have the space to decide and discover for themselves, like the fact that, for her, it wasn't a clear liquid, or it was a clear liquid, but it was smelly, so I'm pretty sure it's not water. And oh, hey, look, it also bubbles. So I noticed that water doesn't do that. And then she was able to figure out, like, no, I don't want that water that you have over there. I want the stuff in the other bottle that makes the fizzy stuff. So she was able to, again, discover that on her own because she had the space to do that. And because I didn't just tell her, no, it's not water, it's vinegar. So, I know it's really hard making this transition, and we are like literally changing our identities as teachers, and it's hard to do. It's discovering this new language of interacting with your students and interacting, just in planning, just interacting, I guess, and communicating and how you respond, and old habits do die hard. So we're really setting aside what we thought it was like to be a teacher, what it looked like, what it felt like, and embracing a whole different way of doing and kind of transforming ourselves. So it takes time. It's hard work. It doesn't always come naturally. It sometimes feels uncomfortable. Like these words don't feel comfortable coming out of my mouth right now. But just don't sweat it too much. It's a process. It happens through baby steps. It's bits and pieces, but eventually it just does get easier, and it doesn't become so much of a thought process. Even answering my daughter with, okay, you're fine, switching to, what do you think about that? Now it's just very natural for me to say, well, what do you think about that? Where before I just naturally said, it's fine. So anyway, it's baby steps. It's a process. If it's not all coming to you right now, don't let it become a source of overwhelm. It will happen. Just, keep on doing your best and keep on trying. So that said, though, if you do want some help on this journey, that's what I'm here for. Kickstart AHA is the free Intro to the NGSS mini course, and it's really a great way to get started. It gives you like a grip on the basics. It's delivered right to your inbox over 4 days. There's some bonus resources that come with like short videos on 10 minutes each, and it's just a good way to go ahead and get started with that. If you're ready for like a true transformation though, and really ready to like embrace three-dimensional learning, and this phenomenon-based and exploration-based teaching and learning, then iExplore Academy is definitely the community for you. Beyond like the step-by-step program to develop and deliver your lessons and unit storylines and the assessments and all of that, and even translating it to online learning, because we have a whole course in there that we did this summer about translating the NGSS for online. You also get the community and the monthly resources, so the training to support the community, all of that stuff. So if you have any questions about iExplore Academy, please reach out, drop me a note, or send me a message. And we can just chat if it's right for you. And even how to get the program funded for you, if funding is an issue. And then, of course, if your school or district is looking for some professional development, I'd love to chat with you. I'm booking for like later this fall, as well as in the spring semester. So I would love to talk with you and whoever makes the decisions at your school. And I'd love to just work with your team to give you a jump start on 3D learning and curriculum development and all that fun stuff. So thanks so much for tuning in today. I'm glad you guys were able to join me, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. I will talk to you guys later.